Do you believe there are secret projects where people are using materials that are, let's say, beyond this world?
A star can only create materials up to iron. That's called the iron limit. The rest of all the heavy metals and materials in the world come from supernova. So you, me, and everything around us is stardust. So in that way, all of this did come from beyond this world.
So another area that is futuristic is the area of implanted devices in the brain.
Will we ever get to, plugging a jack into the back of your head like Keanu Reeves and saying, I know Kung Fu? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, today, you have cochlear implants. So we already have pieces of it. These things are coming. I've watched too much Star Trek. I do not want Borg implants. You're not going to have me assimilate and join the collective. I'm going to stay independent.
But do you think we're going to get real human-level artificial intelligence?
Every time we think we've built a supercomputer and a simulator that's equivalent to the human brain, we find out that actually there's more to the human brain than we thought, and we need a bigger computer to simulate. There are layers upon layers of understanding, even of our own biology, that we don't have.
They're saying there are 7 stargates in the world that come from extraterrestrials.
Anything like that would require energy on a scale that nothing on this earth that we know of can produce. Not only would there have to be some sort of gates, but there would have to be some sort of extravagantly advanced energy source for it. I've always been fascinated by stargates. One thing that always bothered me was, what about the electromagnetic pulse from that thing? It would have been huge. It would take down all of Southern California when they fired it up, right?
Hello, everybody. Today we talk about business, space, secret space, and materials. And with me today, we have Zaheer Ali, who is a professor of space business at Thunderbird University. He is currently the director of strategy at HP Supercomputers. He's been a founder entrepreneur, and he worked at Material Minds, that is a company that is trying to use artificial intelligence to develop new materials. And formerly, he worked at NASA. Hello, Zaheer. How are you today?
It's my pleasure to be here, Paolo. I can't wait to get started talking about some of this amazing, cool stuff that we work on.
Do you believe that anywhere in this planet, there are secret projects where people are using materials that are, let's say, beyond this world?
In so many ways, yes, and in some ways, no. At the end of the day, a star can only create materials up to iron. That's called the iron limit. The rest of all the heavy metals and materials in the world come from supernova. So you, me, and everything around us is stardust. So in that way, all of this did come from beyond this world. Are there materials that the public doesn't know about that are being used and developed? Definitely.
So one of the sci-fi materials are these materials to produce magnetic fields. They're called superconductors. And do you think 50 years from now we will have them?
50 years, that may be a stretch, but certainly 100 years. This is the holy grail of conductors, the room temperature superconductor, because it would revolutionize society in ways that people don't completely understand. You talk about energy problems in our world, they're gone overnight if we have a room temperature superconductor. We lose 70% almost in transmission lines in the United States of America. That's getting the power from the power plant to your house. Can you imagine if we got back that 70% because we had a superconducting transmission line? And then you think about all the applications to magnetic fields, to propulsion, to gravity, anti-gravity. There's so many things that room temperature superconductors enable. And having researched in this area myself, my brother, who's a world expert, Dr. Zaheer Ali, professor at Technical University Delft, his advisor was Bob Kava, who invented YBCO, which is the highest at the time the highest temperature superconductor ever recorded. This is an active area of research. It's going to happen. It's not an if, it's when, and it will make humanity so much better for it.
So another area that is futuristic is the area of implanted devices in the brain. 50 years from now, do we have something really into our brains? Are we walking around with neural implants and have super memory, super ability to calculate mathematically?
It's something that is going to happen in different form factors. And it's going to start with very specific use cases first. Will we ever get to, plugging a jack into the back of your head like Keanu Reeves and saying, I know Kung Fu? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, today, you have cochlear implants, which put a receiver on the outside of your ear and then a chip on the inside of your brain and directly give that signal to your brain. So we already have pieces of it. These things are coming. What the implications of that are, that's a whole nother question. But will this happen? Certainly.
So having these chips in the brain is a good thing or a bad thing, in your opinion?
I think it's a bad thing, personally. I've watched too much Star Trek. I do not want Borg implants. So, I'm just saying, you're not going to have me join assimilate and join the collective. I'm going to stay independent. That's the way maybe it's because maybe it's the American sentimentality. We're fiercely independent. But I'll tell you this, it's going to help a lot of people too. It's going to help a lot of people communicate. It's going to help a lot of people learn. It's going to make surgeons better. It's going to make law enforcement better. It's going to make pilots better. It's going to make so many things better. The integration of the human and the machine is an inevitable thing in our society, because it's not really an integration of human and machine. In many ways, it's an amplification of the human. At the same time, this is Oppenheimer's problem. What have I done? When Oppenheimer saw the test at Mercury and saw what he had fundamentally created, he knew that this was a knife. And just like a knife, it can be used for good things. You can chop some, onions and basil and make a beautiful pasta sauce, or you can use it for some very bad things. And that's really, what it's going to come down to. It is going to come down to the human element and the human uses and the human choices around that technology.
So I want to ask you another question, which we will come back again. But do you think we're going to get real human level artificial intelligence anywhere near in the next 20, 30 years?
This is a real challenging question. I actually do not think the so-called singularity, as Kurzweil famously called it, is likely in our lifetimes. And let me tell you why. Every time we think we've built a supercomputer and a simulator that's equivalent to the human brain, we find out that actually there's more to the human brain than we thought, and we need a bigger computer to simulate it. We need more memory. We need more that. We need more of that. There are layers upon layers of understanding, even of our own biology, that we don't have. So will there be kind of a Westworld or Blade Runner type simulacrum that is basically all impossible to distinguish unless you know? Probably. I actually think that's going to happen. But will it be a true intelligence? I'm more skeptical about that. And because again, computers and AI can be generative, but they've never been truly creative. Only a human has demonstrated that. They're amazing, but the bottom line is, if you can't create, are you conscious?
We'll discuss above top secret technological developments at the first Silicon Valley Conference on Secret Space Technologies business applications. Experiences and witnesses of advanced technologies will present how they've interacted with the innovations and discoveries far beyond our current landscape, but that may one day not be too far from our reality. In this conference, we'll discuss the futuristic civilian applications of these technologies to our economy. It's about time that we started challenging our current beliefs and limitations and started to envision a more advanced civilization for us and our children. One day, we may be using some of these secret space technologies to build viable civilian business applications.
There is something new that is happening in Silicon Valley. It's not as advertised as artificial intelligence, but it's called space tech. If you have a 6 years old, what is space tech? How is it different than NASA?
I've got a 5-year-old just a few rooms away, and to her, space tech is, hey, she can imagine that in her lifetime she can work on the moon and be a tourist on Mars. That's space tech, in my opinion, for a 6-year-old. It's the reality that you don't have to be a government employee, an Air Force pilot, or a NASA scientist to be part of the space economy. It's the reality that space is around us. Right now, we're using 15 different space assets just to have this call. So space tech, just like the kids born in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, grew up native to the internet. Children of my daughter's age, the 6-year-olds now, are growing up native to space. And it's really exciting because they no longer see the barriers. The sky is not the limit for them. Beyond the sky is where they're going, right? They're going into the black. They're going out into the stars. That's human destiny, period. And so space tech is more than just the technology. It's the mindset that these kids are going to have, that the stars are my destiny, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do amazing things. And at some level, we don't know what all those things are going to be yet. But we have to lay the groundwork in our generation to enable them to do it.
What is the biggest achievement in the last 5 years for space tech that people don't know that much?
I would call it the commoditization of launch and launch vehicles. What do I mean by that? If you go buy a car, you have in the US, you got 50 or 100 different choices, maybe more. I don't even remember. There's so many cars, right? You can go pick which one, your color, your size, your blah, blah, everything, right? Before, that's not how rockets work. That's not how launch worked. You have to go, you have to specify, you have to write down every little thing. You couldn't just go buy it off of a lot. Now you can go buy launch off of a lot. You call them up, you say, hey, I got this, I gotta go, boom. It's like UPS. 2 days ago, I spoke with Peter Beck of Rocket Lab, the scrappy former startup, now international launch company out of New Zealand. They just announced a service, responsive launch systems. It's gonna be like FedEx or UPS to the moon. That's crazy. The ability to, for a few $1,000s, get to orbit and not have to think about anything else except what you want to put there is definitely the biggest achievement.
When we kind of agreed to do this talk, in my mind, there is this startup that you have contributed to fund, which is Materials Mind. And the idea behind that startup is basically to use artificial intelligence to precisely engineering materials. How can we assess the impact of material to the economy today and to our society?
We learned about the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. We literally name ages of humanity after the materials we have access to. They're that fundamental to our society. Materials define what we can create. That's the bottom line. That's why we spend so much time and effort, and we're creating artificial intelligence assistants to help us figure out new materials. For example, with silicon, the ability to inject other materials into silicon and make that silicon then be what's called a semiconductor, sometimes pass electricity and sometimes not, and be able to turn that off is fundamentally what enabled us to go from vacuum tubes to a transistor to the iPad that I'm talking to you on. That was a materials discovery. Another one of my favorite examples is the blue LED. The blue LED, your life depends on the blue LED. It is fundamental to everything, all of our read-write technology in data. It's fundamental to sensors. It's fundamental to everything. All the LEDs that you see of other colors are possible because of the blue LED, because that higher energy lets you have lower energy colors. That was a materials discovery. Every time there's a critical step in materials, we get a critical step up in civilization. They're tied together inextricably.
But where do you think the materials rank compared to fossil fuels in importance in the economy today?
The reality is that without the right materials, fossil fuels are irrelevant. If you don't have the right type of aluminum casting, you can't build a combustion engine. So that's a materials issue. The drill bits, the very drills that go down into different types of soil and rock, etc., that material had to be engineered and developed. And so your ability to access the fossil fuel is dependent on that material. There's kind of a back and forth, a cycle between energy and materials. Certain materials let us access higher energy, which lets us access a better material, which then lets us access a different type of energy, which then lets us access another better material. And so there's a back and forth and a feedback loop there. So right now we're in the middle of what you would call a conversion of our economics, where the fundamental basis of energy creation and transport and storage, which has for 200 years been based on different types of fossil fuels, everything from coal to oil, right, and everything in between, is now converting to being based off of metals. What people sometimes forget is we all get impatient. Oh, it's going to take 50 years. No, it's going to take a couple hundred years. Fossil fuels are still relevant, and in particular, the byproducts of fossil fuels like plastics, fibers, polymers, etc., are going to be really important to our society, moving forward, probably for a very long time. But that's kind of how they interplay. It's not one or the other. It's a cycle, like so many things in life.
We will discuss above top secret technological developments at the first Silicon Valley Conference on Secret Space Technologies Business Applications. Experiences and witnesses of advanced technology will present how they have interacted with innovations and discoveries far beyond our current reality, but that may be one day not too far from becoming our reality. In this conference, we will discuss the futuristic civilian applications of these technologies to our economy. It's about time that we start challenging our current beliefs and limitations and start to envision a more advanced civilization for us and our children. One day, we may be using some of these secret space technologies to build viable civilian business applications.
So in this bigger picture, where does artificial intelligence come in and why has a role to play in materials economy today?
AI, as we think about it, is really right now still about helping humans make better decisions or figure things out better. The same way that a calculator is, it's a very glorified one, but it's not that different from the calculator you use to help you multiply big numbers because it's easier than doing it on paper, doing it in your head. When you think about materials, all the possible combinations of all the possible elements and atoms and different arrangements, because even if you have the same element, but you arrange it differently in the crystal, it has different properties. It's a different material, right? Aluminum metal or wire that we play with versus a beautiful sapphire ring, those are both effectively types of aluminum, and yet they're so different. That's the arrangement of the elements within the solid. That's a huge possibility combinations. How do you narrow that down so that you can test and create the right ones for the use you want to do? That's hard. Right now, most of that work is done in a lab with very expensive machines. It takes PhD level scientists and students, and it takes years. It's very expensive, and you have no guarantee of success because you're just trying things out. Now, you make intelligent choices the best you can, but still, you're trying things out in this huge amount of possibilities. What we can do with AI is take that possibility set and go and cut out all the stuff that we're sure doesn't work, because we can train the computer, train that intelligence to help us cut away the stuff that's not going to work and only test in a small amount of materials that are likely candidates to be relevant for what we want to do. It is a revolution in the way we think about how you do discovery and applications of materials.
Is there something we already have achieved with this combination? Like one material that came to the world and it's a special for some reasons that we did with artificial intelligence that you know?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just a couple of years ago, one group working with a major aerospace corporation, I forget whether it was Lockheed or Boeing, they designed the material for the leading edge of a wing for hypersonic flight. Hypersonic flight is very challenging in a lot of different ways because stuff gets hot. You don't think of stuff heating up when you move your hand through the air, but when you're going that fast, it gets hot. And so they needed a special alloy. So this technique was able to be used to engineer that alloy and make that wing possible to go to Mach 15 and beyond. Engineered materials are already affecting our lives.
So you want to completely engineering the material based on what you want to do with it. So that's like the direction where we're going.
And that's absolutely right. So that's the natural evolution, is to go from engineering requirements to use case. And that will happen over time. But right now, kind of where the world is and where we are as a company is we can provide other companies the right material for the properties they need for the next generation of camera, the next generation of computer chip, or the next generation of aircraft wing.
You can say how the material should be done, but then can you really build it?
We've trained the AI to rank results partly by manufacturability and supply chain. Those are really big deals, right? Can you get the material and can you do anything with it, particularly at scale, right? Because if we just say to somebody, oh, well, this is going to help you make a better microchip. Well, we don't want to build one of them. We want to build a billion of them.
The ability to build something new is also what we're lacking in a way. What is coming to my mind is this guy, I don't know if you heard of him, but he was very, very popular in the 90s when he came up. This guy, Bob Lazar, is basically saying he worked in these black projects where he was reverse engineering alien crafts. And one of the things I got really fascinated is this perfect, thermodynamically perfect thermoelectric materials, 100% conversion from heat to electricity. And here's the question for you. Can we do that anytime soon?
The materials that you could do that with are right now very, very hard to manufacture. That's the challenge, right? I mean, and so we know what those materials might be. We can sit down and we can calculate what they would be on paper, but we're very limited in our ability to create them. That's the interplay that sometimes people forget, is they say, oh, well, it's not possible, or we can't do it because we don't know how to manufacture that. But there could be another material that's more manufacturable that has similar properties, but you have to go and figure out what that is. And that's, again, where the AI comes in. What's interesting is that a computer will never limit itself within the data set you give it. It will look at everything in every possibility. A human, even the most open-minded of us, we set parameters in our own brain. It's human nature. And so one of the things we do at Material Mind is sometimes we'll let our discovery engine, that's what we call it, because it discovers materials, we'll let it run.
So another thing, which is stargates. They're saying there are 7 stargates in the world that come from extraterrestrial, from ancient, that the US military has recovered. 2 are in North America, 3 are in South America, and 2 are in the Middle East. They're saying that they've been reverse engineering, and that now the jump gates, as they call, they exist, and they use them to transport stuff to the moon and to Mars. So that's the theory.
It's always fun to think about these things, but I'll tell you what, having worked as a government scientist, I grew up at Livermore Lab, literally. Like, I was 17 and a half when I got my first internship there. I grew up there. It's really damn hard to keep a secret, especially a big secret. I'm just going to be honest, right? And the other thing is that anything like that would require energy on a scale that nothing on this earth that we know of can produce. Not only would there have to be some sort of gates, but there would have to be some sort of extravagantly advanced energy source for it. And so that you stack all the things that it would take to make that real. You know, one never says things are impossible, but it's highly improbable.
Look, one thing though is when you look at the gate, at the circle that produces all that electrostatic and magnetic field that has to be huge, you need a superconductor, room temperature superconductor. Can AI give us that?
I think AI, possibly my AI at Material Mind, will help us accelerate the path to the room temperature superconductor. And if it happens in the next 50 years, it'll be because of AI, because AI has helped humans do it. There are so many possibilities. Superconductivity is still an only partly understood phenomenon. There are 2 types of superconductors. We understand one of the types very, very well, but the type 2 superconductor is weird. We don't completely understand all of this. We don't completely understand what's going on. And even with room temperature or higher temperature superconductors, there's other physics there that is different from the cryogenic superconductors. So will AI help us figure this out? Absolutely. Can I guarantee that it's going to deliver it in 20 years? No guarantees, but it's definitely going to accelerate it. And the other thing to think about, I've always been fascinated by Stargate. One thing that always bothered me was, what about the electromagnetic pulse from that thing? It would have been huge. It would take down all of Southern California when they fired it up, right? I mean, so that always confused me. I'm like, how are they controlling the electromagnetic pulse?
Do you think artificial intelligence can now quell some of the human biases, if you like, in the process of exploring new ideas and new things?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest ways it's going to do that is it's going to prove that things are not impossible. I'll tell you a personal example. 2.5 years ago, when my brother and I started Material Mind, and what we set out to do, people told us it was impossible. We said, bugger off. We're going to do it anyways. And now, just last year, we've discovered 6 materials. We're patenting them that people said could never exist. And we're testing them. And computers aren't limited. They don't self-limit. Humans self-limit. If science suffers from the innovator's dilemma, where the very things that have made us successful also act as an immune system and keep some of the crazy ideas that could be possible from coming up. And we need to stop doing that. We need those crazy ideas. The AI is going to help break those limits for us. People get scared of AI, but I'm excited. I really am. Because what it's going to do for materials and for other fields is it's showing us the art of the possible. And it's giving us the ability to run 1 million experiments in a computer rather than the lab where it would take 100 years to run those 1 million experiments. I can run those 1 million experiments in 1 week. That changes everything.
A day in the life, 100 years from now, what materials, what innovations do you think will be part of the reality?
Absolutely. Well, I think it goes back to the neural implants. I think, we'll communicate at the speed of thought rather than at the speed of speech. We'll be able to communicate completely without language barriers. The Star Trek trope of the universal translator, that may be one of the few pieces of technology I would want inside of me. Right now, we live our world, even though we think of it in 3 dimensions, we live our world in 2 dimensions. We live on the surface of the Earth. We don't live in the sky. We don't live in space. That's changing. Why can't we have cloud cities like Bespin? Why can't we have Ringworld like Larry Niven imagined? We need to unite better as a species as we move out beyond the cradle of our civilization, right? Our Garden of Eden, the Earth. One of the things we talk about a lot about in materials is the need to move materials processing off of Earth. To me, the greatest use of space is to preserve Earth. You look at the way clothes are produced and dyes and fashions responsible for over 1/4 of the total pollution in the world. So it's not just about carbon production and fossil fuels where materials can help. It can help us in all these other facets of our world. And all of that's going to be possible through the application of AI to materials, AI to biology, and AI to a variety of other things we think about. So, I think the future is bright. But at the same time, it takes conversations like the one we're having and intent from those of us who have the capability, who are working in technology or working in policy or working in finance to make that world better and make that brighter future possible. And I think materials are the key, 100%, enabled partly by AI to make that better world possible.
For our audience, Zaheer will be a speaker at our upcoming conference in Silicon Valley, the first Silicon Valley conference on secret space program and business applications. So Zaheer, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paulo. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to our conference here shortly.